Syrian military, propped up by its Russian ally, has brought its civil war towards a more favorable end. For 2020, Syria is ranked 55 of 138 out of the countries considered for the annual GFP review. It holds a power index rating of 0.8241, 0.0000, considered perfect. The Syrian Arab Armed Forces are the military forces of the Syrian Arab Republic. They consist of the Syrian Arab Army, Syrian Arab Air Force, Syrian Arab Navy, Syrian Arab Air Defense Force, and several paramilitary forces, such as the National Defense Force. According to the Syrian constitution, the President of Syria is the Commander-in-Chief of the armed forces. The military is a conscripted force. Males serve in the military upon reaching the age of 18, but they are exempted from service if they don't have another brother who can take care of their parents. Since the Syrian civil war, the enlisted members of the Syrian military have dropped by over half from a pre-civil war figure of 325,000 to 150,000 soldiers in the army in December 2014, due to casualties, desertions and draft dodging, reaching between 178,000 and 220,000 soldiers in the army, in addition to 80,000 to 100,000 irregular forces. Before the start of the Syrian civil war, the obligatory military service period was being decreased over time. In 2005, it was reduced from 2.5 years to 2 years, in 2008 to 21 months, and in 2011 to a year and a half. Since the Syrian civil war, the Syrian government has reportedly engaged in arrest campaigns and enacted new regulations, with citizens who have completed mandatory conscription being called up for reserve duty. With its headquarters in Damascus, the Syrian military consists of air, ground and naval forces. Active personnel were estimated as 295,000 in 2011, with an additional 314,000 reserves. Paramilitary forces were estimated at 108,000 in 2011. Estimates of the declining size of the armed forces over time include 141,400, June 2019, 50% shrinkage according to sources. In 2011, the majority of the Syrian military were Sunni, but most of the military leadership were Alawites. Alawites made up 12% of the pre-war Syrian population but 70% of the career soldiers in the Syrian army. A similar imbalance is seen in the officer corps, where some 80% of the officers are Alawites. The military's most elite divisions, the Republican Guard and the 4th Armored Division, which are commanded by Bashar al-Assad's brother Mar, are exclusively Alawite. Most of Syria's 300,000 conscripts in 2011 were, however, Sunni. Syrian Army. In 1987, Joshua Sinai of the Library of Congress wrote that the Syrian Arab Army (SA) was the dominant military service, and as such controlled the senior-most posts in the armed forces and had the most manpower, approximately 80% of the combined services. In 2010, the International Institute for Strategic Studies estimated Army regulars at 220,000, with an additional 280,000 reserves. That figure was unchanged in the 2011 edition of the Military Balance, but in the 2013 edition, in the midst of the war, the IISS estimated that Army strength was 110,000. By the end of 2017, analysts estimated the SA to have just 25,000 combat-ready troops. Syrian Air Force. The Syrian Arab Air Force is the aviation branch of the Syrian Armed Forces. It was established in 1948 and saw combat in 1948, 1967, 1973 and in 1982 against Israel. It has seen combat against militant groups on Syrian soil from 2011-12 during the Syrian Civil War. Presently there are at least 15 Syrian Air Force bases throughout the country. In 2011, Russian sources reported 40,000 personnel in the Air Force, while Reuters reported 100,000. Syrian Navy. In 1950, the Syrian Navy was established following the procurement of a few naval craft from France. The initial personnel consisted of soldiers who had been sent to French academies of naval training. In 1985, the Navy consisted of approximately 4,000 regular and 2,500 reserve officers and men. The Navy is under the Army's Latakia Regional Command. The fleet was based in the ports of Latakia, Banias, Manat al-Baida and Tartus. Among the 41-vessel fleet were 2 frigates, 22 missile attack craft, 2 submarine chasers, 4 mine warfare vessels, 8 gunboats, 6 patrol craft, 4 missile corvettes, 3 landing craft, 1 torpedo recovery vessel and, as part of its coastal defense system, several shore-based, anti-ship missiles with a range of 300 kilometers. In 2011, the Navy was estimated to have 5,000 personnel. Syrian Air Defense Force. In 1987, according to the Library of Congress Country Studies, the Air Defense Command, within the Army Command but also composed of Air Force personnel, numbered approximately 60,000. In 1987, units included 20 air defense brigades and 2 air defense regiments. The Air Defense Command had access to interceptor aircraft and radar facilities. Air defenses included SAW-5 long-range SAM batteries around Damascus and Aleppo, with additional SAW-6 and SAW-8 mobile SAM units deployed along Syria's side of the Lebanese border and in eastern Lebanon. At some later point in time, the Air Defense Command was upgraded into a separate Syrian Air Defense Force. In 2011, Russian sources reported 60,000 personnel in air defense. Weapons. Syria received significant financial aid from Persian Gulf Arab states as a result of its participation in the Persian Gulf War, with a sizable portion of these funds earmarked for military spending. In 2005, Russia forgave Syria of 3/4, or about $9.8 billion, of its $13.4 billion Soviet-era debt. Russia wrote off the debt in order to renew arms sales with Syria. As of 2011, arms contracts with Russia, Syria's main arms supplier, were worth at least $4 billion. Syria has conducted research and produced weapons of mass destruction.